It's 1971. The streets are loud. Gas is cheap, so cheap that nobody even thinks twice about filling up a 20-gallon tank for pocket change. Muscle cars prowl every boulevard, every drive-in, every Friday night stoplight. The air smells like leaded exhaust and burning rubber. America is still riding the last great wave of cubic inches, chrome, and unapologetic horsepower. And Ford has just unleashed one of the biggest, angriest, most intimidating engines it has ever dared to put into a production car. 7.5 liters of cast iron. A massive 4.36-inch bore that looks like you could drop a softball into each cylinder. A crankshaft so heavy and so overbuilt that it looks like it belongs in a diesel truck or an industrial generator, not a passenger vehicle. They call it the 460. On paper, it's an absolute monster, the kind of engine that makes other engines nervous just sitting in the parking lot, the kind of displacement number that stops conversations at car shows, the kind of torque rating that makes tow truck drivers nod with genuine respect. But what almost nobody tells you is that this engine carries a dark side, a side filled with compromises that were baked into the design from day one. Rushed decisions made in boardrooms where accountants had more power than engineers, and engineering shortcuts that would haunt Ford for decades, shortcuts that still spark arguments in shop bays and internet forums to this very day. Most people think the Ford 460 was just another big, dumb muscle-era V8, reliable, unkillable, a torque machine that could tow anything, haul anything, survive anything. But that's not the whole story, not even close. Because the truth is, the 460 wasn't born out of passion or racing glory or any desire to dominate the competition. It was born out of panic. Pure, corporate, deadline-driven panic. And what happened next changed Ford's big block legacy forever, in ways that still divide enthusiasts today. You think you know this engine? Not like this. Back in the late 1960s, Ford was under pressure. Serious existential pressure that kept executives awake at night and engineers working double shifts. General Motors had the 454, a big block Chevy that made massive power and had the racing pedigree to back it up. It was in everything from Chevelles to Corvettes, and it was selling like crazy. Chrysler had the 440 and the legendary Hemi. The 440 was everywhere. A torque monster that moved everything from family sedans to Super Bs. And the Hemi? That was the nuclear option. The engine that won races just by showing up. The engine that made Ford's best efforts look ordinary by comparison. And Ford's legendary FE big blocks, the 390, the 427, and the 428, were aging fast. These were great engines in their time. The 427 had won Le Mans. The 428 Cobra Jet had terrified the competition in NHRA Superstock. But the FE family was expensive to build, with complex machining operations and tight tolerances that drove up manufacturing costs. They were heavy, even by big block standards. And worst of all, they were designed for a world that no longer existed. The FE was a child of the late 1950s, a time when emissions meant nothing, when fuel economy was a joke, when you could build an engine purely for power and let the chips fall where they may. But by 1968, that world was disappearing fast. Emissions regulations were coming down the pipeline like a freight train nobody could stop. Insurance companies were cracking down on high horsepower cars, slapping young drivers with premiums so high that muscle cars became unaffordable for the very buyers who wanted them most. And the muscle car era, that golden age of cubic inches and street racing, was already starting to choke on its own excess. Ford needed a new big block, fast. Not a race engine developed in secret skunkworks facilities. Not a boutique performance motor hand-assembled by specialists. They needed something cheaper to manufacture, something simpler to assemble, something that could survive the coming storm of emissions laws, smog pumps, catalytic converters, and unleaded fuel. So Ford engineers went back to the drawing board with a very different mandate than any big block program before. They created what they called the 385 series engine family. The name came from the 3.85-inch stroke shared across the lineup. This family included the 429, a slightly smaller displacement version that would see service in everything from Mustangs to Thunderbirds, and its bigger, meaner, more controversial brother, the 460. On the surface, the 460 looked genuinely impressive, a 4.36-inch bore, one of the largest ever put into a production passenger car engine, a 3.85-inch stroke that kept piston speeds reasonable even at higher RPM. Add it up, and you get 460 cubic inches, 7.5 liters of displacement, numbers that commanded respect just by existing. Compression ratios started around 10.5.1 in the early pre-emissions years. Aggressive enough to make serious power on the premium fuel of the era. Horsepower ratings ranged from about 365 gross horsepower in the hottest 1968 and 1969 configurations. Numbers that looked competitive against anything GM or Chrysler could offer. But fast forward just a few years, and those same engines were rated at a depressing 212 net horsepower by the mid-1970s. And right there, written in those two numbers, you can already see the problem. This engine didn't fall from grace on its own. It was pushed, hard, by forces that had nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with politics, regulations, and corporate survival. At first, Ford tried to sell the 460 as a legitimate performance powerhouse. You could order it in the Lincoln Continental, where it provided effortless, silent thrust for America's wealthiest buyers. You could get it in the Ford Galaxy and LTD, where it moved massive sedans with surprising authority. It powered the Torino, Ford's mid-size muscle car contender. And yes, you could even get it in the Mustang Mach-1, a Mustang, with a 460. Think about that for a moment, an engine so heavy that it completely destroyed the car's carefully engineered balance. That iron block alone, just the block, nothing else, weighed over 720 pounds. Add the iron cylinder heads, the intake manifold, the carburetor, the accessories, the fluids, and you're staring at nearly 800 pounds of cast iron hanging over the front axle. Turn-in suffered. The car pushed like a dump truck in corners. Braking suffered. The front tires were already overloaded before you even touched the brake pedal. Tires cried for mercy. Front-end components wore at an accelerated rate. But straight-line torque? Oh, it had that in abundance. The early 460s made over 480 pound-feet of torque, a number that would make modern truck engines jealous. Peak torque hit low, around 2,800 RPM, exactly where you'd want it for stoplight launches and freeway merging. Press the throttle from a standstill, and the car didn't accelerate so much as it lunged forward like an angry animal. The rear tires would chirp, the suspension would squat, and suddenly you were going very fast in a very straight line. But here's where the dark side starts to show its teeth. Because while the 460 made big, impressive torque numbers that looked great in brochures and magazine advertisements, it was never designed to rev. The massive bore, that impressive 4.36-inch cylinder diameter, left very little material between the cylinders. Cylinder walls were thin, much thinner than racers would have liked. Overboring more than 0.030 inches was risky. Go beyond that, and you were gambling with structural integrity. Push the engine harder, the way drag racers and hot rodders always push harder, and blocks would crack. Sometimes during runs, sometimes on the dyno, sometimes just sitting in the garage after a hard weekend. At higher RPM, the long, heavy valve train struggled to keep up with engine speed. The push rods were long, the rocker arms were heavy, the valve springs were adequate for cruising but marginal for performance. Valve float became a real documented issue above 5,200 RPM. The valves simply couldn't close fast enough. The engine would stumble, miss, and lose power exactly when you needed it most. And the oiling system? Adequate for cruising down the highway at 65 mph. Marginal under sustained stress. completely inadequate for racing applications. Mechanics who worked on these engines regularly would later say the same thing over and over, in shop after shop, across the country. These engines pull hard from a dead stop. The torque is unbelievable, but push them beyond their comfort zone and they don't give you much warning. They just stop performing. By the early 1970s, everything got worse, much worse. The Clean Air Act hit the American automotive industry like a hammer wrapped in red tape. Compression ratios were slashed from over 10.1 to as low as 8.1, a change that alone cost the engine dozens of horsepower. Camshafts got neutered, duration was shortened, lift was reduced. Profiles that once provided aggressive power delivery were replaced with mild, emissions-friendly grinds that prioritized smooth, idle, over-peak performance. Ignition timing was retarded to reduce combustion temperatures and NOx emissions. Exhaust gas recirculation systems, EGR valves, and all their associated plumbing strangled airflow and diluted the incoming air-fuel charge with inert exhaust gases. By 1975, the 460 was still massive, still 7.5 liters, still impressively large on paper, but it was also painfully, embarrassingly slow. A 5,000-pound Lincoln Continental with a 460 took over 9 seconds to reach 60 mph. That's slower than many modern minivans. Quarter-mile times stretched past 17 seconds, numbers that would have been laughable just 5 years earlier. Fuel economy? Single digits, consistently. Owners joked that the gas gauge moved faster than the speedometer. And they weren't really joking. But Ford wasn't done with the 460 yet. Instead of killing it and admitting defeat, they leaned into its worst trait, its thirst for fuel and its low RPM torque delivery. They turned it into a work engine, trucks, heavy-duty F-Series pickups that needed to tow construction equipment, motorhomes, Class A RVs that weighed as much as small houses, buses, school buses and commercial shuttles that ran all day, every day, industrial equipment, generators, pumps, machinery that needed reliable power in remote locations. And this is where the 460's reputation split in two, permanently, irreparably, right down the middle. On one hand, it became known as indestructible, a stump puller that could move anything, an engine that could tow a house off its foundation without breaking a sweat, a workhorse that would run for 200,000 miles if you changed the oil and didn't ask too many questions. On the other hand, it became infamous because under heavy load, under sustained stress, under the kind of conditions that trucks and RVs experience every single day, the same weaknesses kept showing up, over and over, in predictable, expensive patterns. Oil pressure issues at sustained high RPM. The pump couldn't keep up. Bearings ran dry. Excessive heat built up under load. Temperatures would climb and climb, especially in hot weather. Warped cylinder heads from repeated thermal cycling. Dropped valve seats on unleaded fuel, a problem that plagued these engines for years as the hardened seats required for unleaded fuel weren't always installed correctly. In RV applications, things got ugly fast. Imagine the scenario. A 12,000-pound motorhome loaded with a family's vacation gear, climbing a long grade in Arizona. August, ambient temperature over 100 degrees, wide open throttle, for minutes at a time, because that's the only way to maintain highway speed. Oil temperatures skyrocketed into the danger zone. Coolant temperatures pushed toward boiling. Bearings wore prematurely because the oil was too hot to maintain proper viscosity. Pistons expanded and scuffed cylinder walls, leaving permanent scoring that reduced compression. Mechanics who specialized in RV repairs would pull apart failed 460s and find metal glitter suspended in the oil pan, the telltale sign of a bottom end eating itself alive. Cam bearings would be chewed up, worn down to copper and steel. Main bearings would be flattened, hammered into submission by forces they were never designed to handle continuously. One Ford technician who worked at a fleet service center in Texas during the 1980s reportedly said, "These engines don't die screaming the way some motors do. They don't throw rods through the block or grenade in spectacular fashion. They just quietly give up. One day they're running fine. The next day they're burning oil, knocking, and ready for a rebuild. No warning, no drama, just done. And yet, people kept using them because when they worked, they worked. The sheer displacement covered up a lot of sins. Even a tired, worn-out 460 with marginal compression could still tow a boat or move a heavy truck down the highway. It might be slow, it might drink fuel like water, but it would get the job done. But compared to Ford's earlier big blocks, the legendary FE series that the 460 was supposed to replace, the difference was painful for anyone who remembered the good old days. The 427 FE was a race-bred monster with genuine competition pedigree. Side oiler lubrication that delivered oil directly to the main bearings under pressure. Cross-bolted main bearing caps that could handle the stress of 7,000 RPM all day long. An engine built to live on the ragged edge, designed by engineers who cared about performance above all else. The 460, 2-bolt main bearing caps, standard, adequate for low-stress applications. Designed for low RPM torque delivery, not high RPM screaming performance. Cost cut first, performance second. Ford had traded soul for survivability. And even that survivability was debatable once you pushed the engine beyond its intended operating envelope. By the late 1970s, the 460 was a shadow of its former self. Horsepower ratings dipped below 200, a number that would have been embarrassing for a small block, let alone a 7.5-liter big block. Throttle response was lazy, thanks to emissions equipment that delayed and diluted everything. Engine bays looked like spaghetti bowls of vacuum hoses, wires, and emissions plumbing. Drivers complained that the engine felt tired, even when brand new, like it was working against itself just to maintain highway speed. And then came the final blow. Fuel prices exploded in the wake of oil embargoes and Middle Eastern instability. Suddenly, nobody wanted a 7.5-liter engine that struggled to achieve 8 miles per gallon on a good day. Insurance companies penalized big displacement engines with higher premiums. Buyers walked away from showrooms and toward smaller, more efficient vehicles. In 1997, after nearly 30 years of continuous production, Ford finally killed the 460. No ceremony, no special edition. No tribute model. The tooling was scrapped and sold for salvage value. The assembly line shut down without fanfare. And just like that, Ford's last true big block, the final link to an era of unapologetic displacement, was gone forever. But here's the twist. The story doesn't end with the factory shutdown. Because in the years that followed, something strange and unexpected happened. Hot rodders rediscovered the 460. Engine builders who had written it off as a truck motor started looking at it with fresh eyes. And what they found surprised everyone. With aftermarket aluminum cylinder heads that flowed air like the factory iron heads never could. With forged connecting rods and pistons that could handle real stress. With modern camshaft profiles designed by computers instead of slide rules. With improved oiling systems that actually delivered oil where it was needed, the 460 transformed into something completely different. Suddenly, the same block that struggled to make 220 horsepower in factory trim was making 600 horsepower on pump gas, 700 horsepower with mild boost, 800 horsepower and beyond with serious modifications. Drag racers started choosing the 460 over more traditional Ford racing engines. Tractor pullers loved the massive displacement and low-end torque. Marine engine builders discovered that the 460 made an excellent boat motor with the right modifications. That massive bore that had been a liability in factory form, it allowed huge valves and serious airflow potential. That short stroke that limited factory power, it meant piston speeds stayed reasonable even at high RPM. Fix the oiling, strengthen the bottom end, install decent heads, and the 460 became something Ford never intended, a monster reborn from the ashes of Emission's-era mediocrity. But that aftermarket success only made the dark side more obvious, because it proved one thing beyond any doubt. The 460 wasn't a bad engine. It was a compromised engine, built in a time when regulations mattered more than performance, when cost-cutting beat craftsmanship in every corporate meeting, when survival was more important than greatness. The 460 could have been legendary. The bones were there. The potential was there. The displacement was there. Instead, it became controversial. Loved by some who saw its potential, mocked by others who remembered what Ford big blocks used to be. A brute with no finesse, a giant that forgot how to fight. And that's why its story still matters today. Because the Ford 460 isn't just an engine, it's a warning about what happens when engineering is driven by fear instead of ambition. When regulations shape machines more than imagination. When accountants have more influence than the people who actually have to build and drive the finished product. The 460 didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because it was restrained from birth, held back by forces beyond any engineer's control. And that is the dark side of Ford's 460 big block. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Ford's most controversial and misunderstood engines, let me know in the comments what engine or rivalry you want to hear about next. And make sure to subscribe, because there are plenty more forgotten legends hiding in plain sight, waiting for their stories to be told.